Assembly. Welcome again for another session here on this Wednesday evening, Parenting on Purpose. This is our sixth session, and we were in the middle of talking about the ways in this world and domains in this world for us to show love through respect and honor and kindness. And we left off with respect for authority. And of course, these are things to instill in our kids' lives for them to be raised in the culture and the atmosphere of our family where these things are prevalent, so that the generations to come will know. Psalm 78:6. And our next topic is respect for parents. And the fifth commandment, as you see on your screen, says, honor your father and mother, that your days may be prolonged in the land which the Lord your God gives you. Think of that. It's linked with the first four commandments. And really, so we put four in this one together. The first five deal with man's relationship to God. The last deal with man's relationship with man. So respect for parents, it was clear. I mean, think about a family where there is no respect for parents. Think of the dishonor that takes place, the disorder, the chaos when a parent is not in charge. And I know there are special circumstances. I know there are situations where a parent is not living up to the standard that God, or maybe they're a very abusive parent. I understand those, and there are situations, and there are contexts. Remember, I talked about many sessions ago that if we're going to be legalistic, then we ignore context, but we're not going to be that. We're going to look at context when it comes to our kids' lives and other things. Context is important. The quote on the screen, a child who is allowed to be disrespectful to his parents will not have true respect for anyone, from Billy Graham. Now, there is a little bit of but to add on to that. I know that, and you know that maybe from observations, if you're not a parent yet, you may not have observed this, but that sometimes, because kids are familiar with what's at home, that it is easier to be nicer to or more respectful to those outside the home. I get that does happen. That's something that all of us might feel sometimes in our hearts, and to really to examine in our hearts too, that why is that the case? Am I being hypocritical? Am I living in a different way at home? Am I not being real at home or real in the world or out in society? Which one is it? And so, but for the most part, a child who's allowed to be disrespectful to his parents will not have true respect for anyone. This ties back to authority. We talked about authority. Parents are in authority in the family. And so respecting that authority, and that authority is going to be fair and loving and caring and all those things that are expected, but that authority is in charge. And if there's no respect for the main authority in your life, the number one authority, of course, number one when it comes to on this earth, but if there's no respect for the one who is truly, that most people would agree that is over you in this world, then how would you respect for other people over you? If the primary leader, the primary authority is one you don't have respect for, how could you respect others? There's a lot of truth in that quote. Think about it. Love is the root, obedience is the fruit. We will have a whole session where we're going to dig more into obedience, but I want to say a little bit about it now in this session. Obedience provides the structure, and it provides the self-control. When we don't hold our kids to obedience, when we get relaxed on that, when we get to be a threatening parent who doesn't back up anything, when we exasperate our children, we go either direction, very permissive or very authoritarian, we are not doing them any favor. We are not helping their heart. We are the trainer of our children's self-control on the outside until they understand how to govern it on the inside. Think about that. Obedience is so vital because we are governing it on the outside, And as they get older and as they show that they can be trusted, as they are showing goodness and kindness and understanding that concept of otherness and loving others, that we are letting go in the process. We know that parenting is a process of letting go from the very beginning a child is born, but spiritually as well, that we're letting go and letting them govern the inside. And times when we let them govern it, and maybe they're not quite ready yet, and other times, but we don't control them. This is not authoritarian parenting. I'm not advocating for that at all from the things I've said. Authoritarian would say it's my job to control the child until they leave my house. No, we control their self-control on the outside until they govern it from the inside. We're the temporary teacher to bring that intrinsic control. Think about all of the years that you live on this earth. We have this small window, this brief window to be that teacher for their heart, the trainer of their heart, that in the intrinsic control. One of my favorite movie clips for parenting is from the old movie Hook with Robin Williams and Dustin Hoffman. And as you may recall, Dustin Hoffman at the beginning of the movie is very preoccupied with his job. He promises, you can tell he's promised many times to his family that he would be at certain events, and he's not. We see him promise to be at his son's baseball game, and he shows up at the field and the game's over and no one's even there. But his wife says something to him because they're having a conversation, and he takes a phone call. And he knows she doesn't want him to, but he takes the call anyway. And she grabs the phone and throws it out the window, and she says, "What are you doing? We only have a limited amount of time in our children's lives to speak into them. A limited amount of time when they want us around. And you are missing it." Their childhood and the teen years are such a small window. And if if you can fall into self-shaming like me, I can easily think about the things I could have done better, and I could do this and I could do that, and oh boy, that one time. I'm as I've said before, I'm good at keeping record of my own wrongs, but which I know is not a godly trait at all. But we have this small window, okay, to train their heart. You are to be intentional in the process to move from boundaries to freedom. We have stricter boundaries when they're younger. We talked about that. The referee, remember? Referee, trainer, coach, and teammate. And we move the boundaries out as they grow. But this comes under a respect for parent. This cannot happen unless we keep in place an honor and respect for us and hold them to that accountability. Think about influence. Influences to affect the nature, development, or condition of something. When your children are young, we lead them by our authority. We just do. We are mom and dad. They look for us at certain times. They look for us when they're scared. They have a fit when they might have turned around and they don't see where we are in a store or something like that. Of course, we have a fit as well. But we're the authority. We're the caretaker. We're the ones that they will ask permission to go certain places and to do certain things, and hopefully you're keeping them accountable in that way. But we lead them when they're young by mostly our authority, but as they age, we should be leading them also by our relational influence. That I proved myself in their younger years as someone who's going to love them and care for them and be emotionally invested in their lives, and I'm also going to, for their sake, hold them accountable to respect and honoring me, to obeying, giving constant grace and letting them off the hook all the time doesn't train their heart. That's not being a good parent. That's not shepherding their heart in the way that it should go. Think of the transition that happens in a race, the baton that is passed. We want to move kids from obedience to the transition from obedience to submission, that you've obeyed me, but yet you're submitting ultimately to God, from duty to devotion, rather than, I've got to do this. It's, I want to do this. Because this is in my heart, and because I love Jesus Christ as my Savior, and this is something He would want me to do in this world. This is a person He would want me to go talk to, or out of devotion to Him, I am going to be other oriented. I'm going to love my parents. I'm going to respect my parents. I'm going to love and respect others, and also to move them from obligation of doing right to the responsibility of doing right. There are times in the younger years where we bring in correction or maybe some types of consequences, and it's to help them to hold to that obligation. You're obligated to do what's right. You're part of this family. You are a ambassador of me as the parent, of us as a family, and of God. And so, yes, and I'm not talking about young toddlers that don't understand all these principles. I'm talking about as they grow, the obligation to do right has to be there, and that rests on the parents. Again, we'll come back to talking a lot about obedience in another session, but we want to move them to that responsibility that your child, that our child, that believers across the world, that their children will be ones who look at someone or some need and say, I have a responsibility to do what's right here. There's a Greek word, hupakuo, which means to line up under someone out of duty. And the idea that duty really forces an authoritarian relationship. And we are more authoritarian in their younger years, and we do move a little bit from that, of course, not too authoritative. But hupakuo, lined up under because you have to. Hupatasso, lined up under out of devotion. There's out of a willingness. And devotion fosters trusting relationships. That my children, as they have grown, and they call me to talk about life situations or just everyday things. It is a great reward for me. But I built that, my wife and I built that relationship. We held them to accountability, and we let go as they grew up. And the fact that they have a devotion to us now as their parents is a wonderful thing to see. But you can't have that unless you are holding them to the standard when they're younger. Discipline says I need to, duty says I ought to, devotion says I want to. We want to raise kids, again, and this is going to be the third time I've said it in just a few minutes, that see a person in need or see a need somewhere in society and says, I want to do something about that. That's an outgrowth of Jesus in their hearts, but again, we have to prune, we have to water that, we have to plant it in the first place, and we have to be involved in the process, and they have to see us living it out as well. But discipline says I need to, duty says I ought to, devotion says I want to. That we could raise kids by the things we say, by the way we guide them to respect and show love and kindness to others, that we can help this happen for them to actually want to. We're moving on to the next one, respect for age. And I'm mostly focusing on respect for those older than us, older than your children, but respect has to go the other direction as well. We read scriptures, and we'll look at a couple about respecting those older than us, whose age is greater than us. But there's also scripture regarding to not look down on a person's youth, or to the youth, to not let someone look down on you because of your age. And so this has to be a mutual respect. But when we think of society and what happens in not just American culture, but other places, that the respect for the elderly tends to wane. And maybe it is a little more true in American culture than some others, because we've always been very independent from the very beginning. We've not been communal like of a lot of countries where people emigrated from to come to the U.S. Or a lot of countries are still that way in their families and villages, and maybe a lot more than Americans. And I'm not making excuses. This is not. We cannot excuse our kids of this, and we have to model this. It is one of those things that if we truly model it, if we truly hold our kids to this standard, they will shine brightly for Christ in this world, because there aren't a lot of kids living it. And but when I say that, I'm not creating an us and them. I'm not saying let's create little Pharisees who think they're better than other people. Not at all. But the fact that their light will shine even brighter when they respect and honor people older than them. I remember a time, and this is, I just thought of this, but I remembered this. This was something that was ingrained in me. And it wasn't, I don't know if it was very intentional, if it was just an outgrowth of me grasping Jesus early in my life and so on. But for many years, we lived next door to my grandparents. And my grandfather and grandmother both immigrated from Italy. And my grandfather would always talk about the Lord with tears in his eyes and how thankful he was that he found Christ when he came to America. And boy, he would talk and talk and talk and talk. And I would sit on the wall between our two houses. It was like this, the height of a bench. And there were times I remember as an older child or an older child, and just thinking, I'm doing this for him. I'm showing him love and honor and respect, even though my mind is drifting, even though I'm not concentrating on everything he's saying. Sometimes it was hard with his accent, but other times it was just a lot for attention span is basically a minute per age. So if I was doing this as a 10-year-old, after 10 minutes, I was gone mentally, but I stayed there to love and care for him. And what I found was after my grandfather was gone, there were certain people in my neighborhood that I would do the same thing with. An older gentleman, I would often walk home from work or visiting a friend, and I would see him on his porch, and I'd sit there and just talk with him. Actually, two older gentlemen in two different houses. And I'm not saying, hey, look at me, but I do hope that that we can raise kids who look for those kinds of needs and opportunities. I say needs, but opportunities in this world when a lot of people aren't. Leviticus 19:32 says, stand up in the presence of the aged, show respect for the elderly, and revere your God. I am the Lord. When society honors those who have been here longer, when society says, we respect you because you have more wisdom than us. And I know some of you are probably thinking, yeah, but there are exceptions. I know older people that are really mean and don't have much wisdom and have chosen to. Yes, I get that. But overall, that they've been around longer, they deserve our honor, they deserve our respect, and that your kids would have that kind of that reverence. But again, this doesn't just show up. You have to demonstrate. You have to talk about it. Job 12:12, for wisdom is with the aged men, longer life with understanding. Think of some basics here. What about offering your seat to the elderly? Would your child be characterized by doing this? Would they see this? Would they notice if you're on a bus or a subway or in a classroom at church or a fellowship hall or wherever? If they're not characterized by that, you're not a failure. But now's the time to start. Now's the time to plant that in their heart. I remember some of the material I'm sharing in this respect sessions of our series. I have taught, my wife and I have often taught them as kids camps, because we have in the evening had our normal kids services, but then we thought we want to equip them to take that emotion and all of those feelings they have for loving God, but we want to give them something practical to take home and live out the love of Christ in this world. So we would teach things like this. And so there was one time I brought this boy on stage, and I think there's 500-600 kids at camp that year. So there are that many kids sitting out there. And I set this up to make this boy successful in front of him. I said, you know what? We talked about honoring and loving people and people older than us. I said, pretend you're in a room. And he's standing on the stage with me. I said, pretend you're in a room and there's a circle of chairs. And you're in one of those chairs, and in walks an older person. And they might be older, and like with a cane, and all the chairs are taken. And so what are you going to do? Because you know that as a believer, you love others, and that you're an example of Jesus in this world like we've been talking about. And you could love and serve people. And so you're in a chair, and that person doesn't have a chair. And so what are you going to do? And I had to try to recover this because I didn't want this child to be shamed in front of the entire camp. But he says, help them find a spot on the floor. And I'm not taking a shot. I'm not setting up a straw man. I'm not taking a shot at a kid. I don't even know who he is and how many years ago that was. But just the concept of that no, that we're gonna look for something higher than that, a greater standard than that, to give up our seat for the elderly. And let's broaden that. Give up our seat for other people too. And maybe they don't have to be old and with a cane. They don't have to be bent over and hardly walking or having difficulty walking. Maybe it is someone with a limp. Maybe it's someone, and I know that this is a risk, because sometimes you do gestures for people and they get upset about it because they don't want your help, or I get that, but still that doesn't take away the fact that this is a principle that we can put in our kids' hearts. How about number 2, opening and holding a door? I referred to in a previous session how countless times I'd have our kids would run ahead and grab the door for people, and I watch them do that now in their adult years, and it just warms my heart. How about helping carry or pick up something? I've have done a whole class session. I believe I referred to this before. Serving Jesus at Walmart. All of the opportunities and all the scenarios that could come up when you're at Walmart, and the person in front of you that's by themselves and has all of these groceries to carry, especially if they're an older person or a single mom or whatever, and that you would help, and that you would display it to your kids. I'm going to say something I haven't said yet in this series, and I'm surprised I haven't yet, but being a parent made me a better follower of Jesus. Think about that. That doesn't just happen. You have to make that choice. But being a parent, I say this to my SAGU students all the time, made me a better follower of Jesus, because the accountability of someone always watching and always being around me, and that idea that whatever I do, they're not just watching it, but they're internalizing it. And someday they could even mirror it. So Jesus, help me to be a reflection of you that my kids also want to reflect, that they want to mirror. And so we could brainstorm a lot of different things. We could think about helping someone cross the street. When someone drops something, to hurry up and help them pick it up. There are so many things in everyday life. Let's go back to the Shema. Let's go back to that when Moses gave the words of the Lord on the plains of Moab to the new generation. Talk about these when you rise and when you sit and when you walk by the way. There is so much in our everyday life that we miss. If your life is too busy to catch these things, then get rid of some things, because your children deserve their heart to be molded to find ways to honor the elderly. And I'm going to expand this a little bit just into basic manners. 1 Corinthians 13:5. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrongs. What was Paul talking about? What was he talking about when he said that? He was talking about love. It does not dishonor others. I'm not going to dishonor others because I have love in my heart. And who is that love from? The creator of the universe, the one who created me, the one who gave me ultimate grace in my life. So I am going to show love and honor to others. Titus 3:2, to slander no one, to be peaceable and considerate, and always to be gentle towards everyone. Again, that word always is kind of weighty, like, are we really? We're supposed to be perfect? We sin, we mess up. We have a God who loves us, and his love doesn't fluctuate. But out of our love for him, we're not going to be rude to others, and we're going to be kind to others, just like the scriptures say we should be, because I'm a representative of Jesus in this world, and because my children are watching, and I need to be the kind of dad, I need to be the kind of husband, I need to be the kind of man that I want my boys to be, and that I want my daughters to marry. Rudeness is a weak imitation of strength. Think about just common courtesy, and how sometimes, if you're like me, sometimes you're just totally shocked when someone is completely rude in a situation when it wasn't necessary. It could have been handled in a different way, and that's easier to do over social media, and it's easier to do through email where you're not face to face with a person. I've been guilty of that. I know it's just so much easier to be rude in that in these other contexts, but think about it. It's a weak imitation of strength. A rude person is being inconsiderate of the person on the other side. A rude person is the one blaming a clerk about something the corporation does or something the store does when it's not the clerk's fault, or chewing out someone on the phone, a customer service person who isn't the owner of the company. They're just the go-between, and so we get this anger inside of us, and it's really again it's an imitation of strength. I'll show them, but that's not strength. That's just being unkind and rude. Look at the other quote: "Never respond to rudeness. When people are rude to you, they will reveal who they are, not who you are. Don't take it personally. Be silent." In another session, I will talk a lot about equipping our kids, empowering our kids to be able to handle the things that people say. And really, that is the way we need to train our hearts and train ourselves. We can't be controlled by rude people. And to tell our kids, no matter how rude they are, don't let that rudeness control how you feel, but also recognize that it's probably revealing something about them. And you might be saying all of a sudden, well, we're not supposed to judge. When we look at what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount and take it all in context, he is not saying don't ever judge. He's saying use the same standard to judge yourself. Look at the speck in the log in your own eye before you look in the speck in someone else's eye, in your brother's eye. So I'm not saying let's teach our kids to judge people critically, to say, wow, he must really have a problem, but to compassionately say, yeah, this person was really rude. This person's rudeness was off the charts, but I don't know what happened to them today. And this is a struggle for me in traffic. I feel like I am very good at turn signals. I use my turn signal all the time. Why? Because I'm letting other people know what I'm doing. That's a respect. But I get so irritated when people don't offer the same kindness, or when people are like way past the whole no turn signals and just cutting you off and being rude, and maybe even cut you off and flip you off at the same time. It's like, what is this? But I don't know what their day was like. It doesn't excuse what they've done, but I'm not them, and I'm not walking in their shoes. And to give our kids that level of grace too, that they will be able to look at people with love and kindness and respect, even when it's difficult. Let's again, we're talking about the respect for age, but that, I've expanded that quite a bit to not just be older people. What about the person you're talking to, the other adult you're talking to on the phone or in person? You see on the screen, mom, 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 mom. So how do you permit your kids, how do you permit them and train them to interrupt you in such a way that they are showing love and honor to other people? Well, when I teach this in a live class, I will have people come up and help me demonstrate. I will tell them, I'll say, okay, we are two adults. I'm talking to one person, and I'll tell someone, come and interrupt me the way a child should not interrupt, that is disrespectful. So they'll come up and they'll start tugging on me, mom, 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 mom. And then I imitate, or I role play the parent, because a parent does different things in this scenario, right? There are times where you have seen where a parent will just say, ignore the child, okay? And then they'll totally ignore the child. Another time where a parent might say, excuse me, and talk to the child. Or a time a parent won't even say, excuse me, they'll just turn to the child and say, oh, my center of the universe, this person I was talking to was of no worth, or no worth compared to you. I'm being very sarcastic, very facetious here, but that's the message. When a child is allowed to walk up and interrupt you, no matter who you're talking to, that is a total disrespect for the person. And think of what it's doing in their heart. It is not just solidifying the permission to be disrespectful in their heart, but it's really devaluing the person they're learning to devalue someone else. So if you've been characterized by this, there nowhere in Scripture does it address interrupting your parent, but I want you to think of it as a vehicle to show honor, as a way to esteem others, that your child will walk up to you and put their hand on your arm and wait patiently, because when they wait patiently, they're saying, I trust you as the parent, that you know I'm here. I'm going to practice patience in the meantime, and I'm going to honor this person that you're talking to, even if I don't know who that person is. This was one of those practical things. I hope that if you're in the parenting process, that you will help instill this in your kids. I think of when our kids were younger, and when they would just walk up and gently put their hand on my arm, and I would put my hand on their hand to just let them know I'm still talking to this person, but I love you, I care about you, I hear you, I see you, and I'm going to get back to you. So that's a kind thing too, to let them know I'm here. We're going to take care of this. And I love you very much. So let's end this session on that practical usage of how to help our kids love and care for others and respect others, and in the context of elderly and so on. So thank you again for being a part of these sessions, and I look forward to having another chat with you next Wednesday evening for our third part of showing love through respect and kindness.